Hello, everyone. Welcome to the dark. This is In the Shadows, a twisted, obsessive love story where fear becomes longing and longing turns deadly. A masked stranger watches, a girl slips into silence, and the line between danger and desire, it disappears. Put on your headphones and don't look away.
The first time she saw him, she didn't know it was him. Ella McLeod stood on the front porch of her rundown apartment, shaking the rain from her hoodie as her keys jingled in her hand. Another long night at the law office, another double shift. The weight of bills, deadlines, and secrets pressed against her shoulders like cinder blocks. But none of that compared to what was already waiting in the shadows behind her. He was watching. She didn't see the glint of his mask, the pale glimmer of metal that hugged his face like a second skin. She didn't feel the heat of his eyes, the way they drank in her every movement. Slow, soft, desperate. She was his. Inside, she peeled off the wet hoodie, revealing the low-cut tank she hadn't planned to wear in the cold. Her cheeks flushed, more from embarrassment than chill. Her webcam job was supposed to be a secret, temporary, just to get by. But he knew. He always knew. He sat in the dark, far across the street, hidden behind the tinted glass of his black SUV. Raindrops streaked the windshield like tears. His gloved hand gripped the steering wheel tighter each time she pulled her hair up, each time she leaned toward the camera. His queen. His obsession. His final gift to this world before he disappeared into it. Ella dropped into her creaky desk chair, clicked on the laptop, and hesitated. A strange feeling prickled her skin. She turned, looked out the window, eyes scanning the alley across from her apartment. Nothing. Only shadows and rain. She didn't know she was already in his cage. In the shadows, he smiled. The music thumped like a heartbeat. Sebastian leaned against the back wall of his club, watching the sea of strangers twist and blur beneath the strobe lights. He wasn't here for the crowd. He never was. He didn't dance, didn't drink, didn't flirt. He watched. Tonight, he was watching her, Ella. She didn't belong in a place like this. Too soft, too bright, too real. But she was here, curled into herself at the bar, nursing a glass of water. Like it was something stronger. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating escape routes. She had no idea how much danger she was in. Sebastian had seen it before, women looking over their shoulders, pretending not to notice the man lingering too close. He could read it on her. Fear stitched beneath her skin, a ghost in her bones. He moved. Crossed the room with quiet precision, parting the crowd like smoke. His boots hit the floor with purpose. When he reached her side, she looked up and flinched. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, voice low, calm. She studied him, warily, like a cornered animal trying to decide if the approaching shadow meant help or harm. "You work here?" she asked, her voice tight. "I own it." He saw the surprise flash in her eyes. People always expected something else, someone older, colder, meaner. But Sebastian had long learned that power didn't need to shout. It only needed to show up. "I think someone's following me," she said finally, and it wasn't the words that hit him. It was the way she said them. Like this wasn't the first time. like she'd been screaming in silence for weeks. His jaw tightened. "Tell me everything," he said. And she did. The scent of her lingered. Even now, hours later, after the club closed and the streets emptied, you could still smell her skin, a mix of vanilla and fear. He watched from the rooftop across her apartment, crouched low in the shadows, the city pulsing beneath him. She had let the other man touch her. Sebastian. He repeated the name in his mind like a curse, each syllable slicing through him. He had warned her without words, leaving her subtle signs, notes on her mirror, a single red rose outside her door. But she didn't listen. So now, he would speak louder. She belonged to him, and it was time she understood that. He slipped off the roof, boots silent as sin, landing in the alley below. A key glinted in his palm, her spare. He had watched her drop it weeks ago, left it taped under a loose brick. She had no idea how easy it was. Inside, her apartment was warm, soft, glowing with dim lamplight. Her shoes were by the door. She was home, sleeping. He walked through her world like he built it, paused at her bedroom door, watched her chest rise and fall. He didn't touch her. Yet. Tonight was just a reminder. He left a single fingerprint on her bedroom mirror, traced in the shape of a heart. She woke up gasping. Something was wrong. She sat up, heart racing, eyes darting around the dark room. Nothing moved. The windows were closed. The door was shut. But something felt violated. Her skin crawled. She reached for her phone. No missed calls, no messages, just a strange notification. Her webcam had been accessed. At 3:14 a.m. Her blood ran cold. She scrambled to her desk. The laptop was closed, but the webcam, she could swear it was still warm to the touch. Ella slammed it shut and backed away, heart thudding. She was being watched. She felt it, lived it, and no one believed her. She didn't want to call the cops. They'd just ask about the side job, about the things she couldn't explain. So she called the only person who had believed her last night, Sebastian. He answered on the second ring. She sounded panicked, breathless, like she'd just run through a storm, and in her voice was something he couldn't ignore. Trust. She asked him to come over. He didn't hesitate. 20 minutes later, he was standing in her living room, eyes scanning every corner. She sat wrapped in a blanket, pale and trembling. He checked the locks, the windows, the vents. Then, without asking, he took a knife from her kitchen drawer and handed it to her. "Sleep with it beside you," he said, "just for tonight." Ella blinked. "You believe me?" He nodded once. "I've seen men like this before." But what he didn't say, what he couldn't yet explain, was the rage growing in his chest. Not just for her safety, but for the way she made him feel, alive again, like maybe protecting her could save him too. He watched Sebastian touch her. Hands on her shoulder, voice low in her ear. His queen. Letting another man walk her through safety drills like some knight in shining armor. Death's fingers twitched around the grip of the knife in his coat. He wasn't jealous. Jealousy was for weak men. He was territorial, and what was his would never be shared. He had planned to wait, but tonight he would send her a message. He reached the edge of the fire escape and opened his backpack. Inside, a small velvet box. He placed it gently on her windowsill under the moonlight, then disappeared into the night. She saw it the next morning. A black velvet box, perfectly square, resting beside her plants. No note, no address. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a silver necklace with a single drop of blood embedded in the pendant. She screamed and dropped it, but not before seeing the message etched into the velvet. "You're mine." She called him again, and this time a voice broke. He came running when he saw the necklace, the blood, and the note. Something in Sebastian cracked. He knew the type, the predator, the kind who left trophies like breadcrumbs. But this one was smarter, closer, bolder. He took the necklace, wrapped it in a towel, and shoved it in his jacket. "This ends now," he said. She looked up at him, tears brimming. "I can't live like this." "You won't." He didn't know what line he was about to cross, but for her, he was willing to burn everything down. Sebastian was becoming a problem, a very permanent problem. He watched the man exit Ella's building, his jaw tight, his steps calculated, carrying the necklace. Death followed him. Not close, not yet, but soon. He had taken care of threats before. Men who didn't belong, people who touched what wasn't theirs. Sebastian would fall, but first, Ella had to see what happened to those who disobeyed. Tonight, she would hear him. He had a gift, and this time, it screamed. She woke to a sound she would never forget. A scream. High, muffled, close. It wasn't from the street. It wasn't from her laptop. It was coming from her hallway. She ran toward it, barefoot, heart hammering, only to stop cold. A package lay at her doorstep. Inside, a severed tongue. And a note. "He spoke about you. He won't again." Ella dropped to the floor shaking, broken, breathless. He wasn't just watching her anymore. He was hurting for her. And that was worse. So much worse. He'd never seen her cry like that. Not when she dropped her phone, not when she burned her hand on the coffee pot, not even when she spoke to herself in the mirror after her father's anniversary, eyes red, voice trembling. But this, his gift, the tongue, it shattered her. And it made him hard. Not from lust, though yes, her trembling body awakened something primal, but from the satisfaction of control, of ownership, of her realization that she couldn't outrun the thing that lived in her walls, her windows, her mind. Him. He watched her from the fire escape again, crouched in the rain, unblinking. She curled on the floor in front of her door, too afraid to touch the package again. Her breath hitched in short, broken sobs, her knees drawn up to her chest, her body tight with panic. He should have felt guilt, but guilt was a luxury for men with boundaries, and he had none. She didn't remember how long she sat there. Time didn't make sense anymore. Everything was a blur of blood and silence. Her front door stayed locked, bolted. The windows were shut tight. Every creak made her jump. Every gust of wind twisted in her gut like a blade. She called the police. They came, took the box, filed a report, promised to look into it. But she saw it in their eyes. The same look from before. Like she was crazy. Like she was some emotionally unstable woman who just wanted attention. She could practically hear them whispering. Webcam girl gets too many viewers, starts imagining things. She couldn't scream loud enough to be believed. So she screamed in silence and called Sebastian. When he arrived, she collapsed into his chest, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. "I'm losing my mind," she whispered. "No," he murmured into her hair. "You're surviving it." And for one moment, wrapped in his arms, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. He didn't let go of her the entire night. Not when she shivered in his arms, not when she nearly collapsed in the kitchen. Not when she asked, so softly he almost missed it, if he could stay. He tucked her into the bed and stood guard from the chair near her door, all night, unmoving, silent. Sebastian had always been calm, level, the protector, but inside he was boiling. This wasn't just obsession, this was a predator, a hunter, a man who had broken into Ella's life, her home, her soul. And Sebastian swore he would rip him apart. He made some calls, people he hadn't spoken to in years, people who owed him favors from darker days. By morning, he had a name, or rather a pattern. A shadow of a man who had done this before. The stalker wasn't just new, he was practiced, and he was getting closer. Sebastian glanced at Ella, still asleep, curled under the covers, lips parted slightly in peace. She wouldn't see what was coming. But Sebastian would be ready.
They were getting too close. Sebastian especially. That man reeked of secrets, of blood under fingernails, of sins dressed in nice suits. And worst of all, Ella trusted him. That trust tasted like poison in death's mouth. She was his, not to save, not to fix, to own, to worship, to consume. He watched from inside her closet this time, hidden between coats and unused shoes. He could hear her breathing, slow, soft. She was folding laundry on the bed, humming some stupid song under her breath. So peaceful, so unaware. He could almost reach out, touch her wrist, brush her hip, pull her into the dark where she belonged. But no, not yet. She wasn't ready to see his face. Not until she begged for it. He left a single red thread from his coat, wrapped delicately around her bra strap. A promise, a warning, a whisper of what was to come. She found the thread at midnight. She wasn't even looking for it, just trying to fold laundry, distract herself from the nightmares clawing at her skull. It was wrapped around her lingerie. Tight, precise. She froze. She hadn't worn that bra in weeks, hadn't touched that drawer since the last time she went out with her friend Ashley. It should have been untouched. Her chest caved in with panic. She checked the locks, again and again. She checked the cameras Sebastian helped her install, all static, like someone had jammed the feed. She fell to the ground and screamed into her own hands. He'd been here, in her room, while she sang, while she breathed, while she convinced herself she was safe. She wasn't. No one could save her now, not even Sebastian. The camera feeds were blank. He stared at the monitor in Ella's apartment, jaw locked, hands clenched into fists. Static. All 4 cameras, dead. This wasn't a coincidence. This was war. He didn't tell Ella, not yet. She didn't need more fear in her bloodstream. Not tonight. But inside him, something snapped. Sebastian wasn't just her protector anymore. He was becoming her weapon. He spent the next hour scanning the footage, frame by frame, looking for movement, shadows, reflections. And there it was. 1 second, just one, at 2:17 a.m., a flicker in the hallway, a glint of metal, a figure, masked. He was real, and he was close. Sebastian didn't sleep that night. He sat beside Ella's bed, knife in hand, and stared at the door. If the monster came back, this time, it wouldn't be so easy to disappear. He watched them through the cracks in the blinds. Ella fast asleep, Sebastian pretending to be her hero. It made him sick. She was soft when she slept, vulnerable, fragile, beautiful. She needed someone who understood her nightmares, not someone who tried to protect her from them. He was her nightmare. And the line between fear and love, it blurred quickly. He'd been careful, always careful, but the rage, it was making him sloppy. He left his gloves behind this time. A single print on the closet door. He wanted to be seen, wanted her to feel the breath of danger crawling down her neck, wanted her to tremble when she said his name. if she ever found the courage to say it.
The fingerprint was the final crack. She found it the next morning while gathering her laundry, right there on the inside of the closet door. Smudged, oily, human. She sank to the floor, breath gone. She called Sebastian. He came immediately, face pale, fury in his eyes. He tried to stay calm, told her he was going to handle it. But Ella could barely hear him anymore. All she heard was the sound of a heart breaking, hers. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think. And yet, a small, sick part of her felt something else too. Wanted to understand the man who was watching her. Not because she loved him, because she wanted to know why she couldn't look away. He stood in his office, pacing like a caged animal. This wasn't stalking anymore. It was a countdown. Every hour that passed was another chance for the masked bastard to get closer. Another chance for Sebastian to lose her. He wasn't just fighting to protect Ella now. He was fighting something inside himself, something violent, something he'd buried years ago. He opened the drawer, pulled out the gun. He'd promised never to use it again, promised he'd left that life behind. But promises meant nothing when Ella was crying in his arms and whispering, "He was in my closet." Sebastian would kill for her, and if it came to it, he'd die for her too. Tonight, he would speak to her. He'd waited long enough, watched her long enough, loved her long enough. She was ready. He stood outside her window, bathed in shadows, the knife sheathed, untouched. He didn't want to hurt her. He wanted her to see him, to understand that everything he'd done, every warning, every gift, every murder, was for her. He reached up and tapped the glass. Once, twice. Her light flicked on. Their eyes met. And for the first time, she saw him. The mask, the silhouette, the shadow who had lived inside her nightmares for weeks. She screamed, and death smiled. She couldn't stop shaking. He was real. Not a nightmare, not a hallucination, not a whisper in her bones. He stood outside her window, mask glinting in the streetlight, tall and silent. He saw her, and she saw him. For hours after, she sat with the knife in her hand, gripping it so hard her fingers went numb. Sebastian tried to calm her, but even his voice couldn't reach her now. Everything changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was inevitability. He would come again, and next time, he wouldn't just stand outside. He would come in. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to run or finally face him. He was losing control. Ella wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. She flinched at every sound, and every time she looked out the window, her eyes went glassy with dread. He had to fix this. He installed more cameras, reinforced the windows, changed the locks again. But nothing he did could erase the look on her face when she whispered, "He was just standing there watching me." Sebastian had killed before, in another life, a darker one. But this time it would be different. This wasn't a hit. This wasn't revenge. This was protection. For her. He started tracking the patterns. When the intruder came, where he appeared, he marked it all on a map. If the police wouldn't take it seriously, he'd become his own justice. He looked out the window and muttered under his breath, "Come back, I dare you." She saw him, and it was glorious. For the first time, her scream didn't come from fear, it came from recognition. He saw it in her eyes, that flicker of something deeper. She knew him now, knew he was real, knew he wouldn't go away. But she didn't know the truth, that she was just like him. He had watched her for months, watched her unravel slowly like a ribbon in the wind. She didn't cry for help. She lived in silence. She wore her pain like armor. She was lonely, wounded, and exquisite in her brokenness. She wasn't a victim. She was a match, and he was the flame.
He was everywhere, in the reflection of her coffee spoon, in the black screen of her laptop, in the creak of the hallway floor at midnight. She started talking to him, not out loud, not in madness, just in whispers, in thoughts. You're not real. Go away. Why me? The terrifying part wasn't that he was haunting her. The terrifying part was that part of her didn't want him to stop. She felt it in her chest, a hollow ache every time he disappeared for more than a day. A pulse of panic when the window stayed untouched, when the gifts stopped coming. What did that mean? What kind of girl craved her stalker? He found the first message scratched into the back alley wall, a single word carved in long, jagged letters. Mine. Sebastian stared at it, eyes burning with fury. This wasn't just about scaring Ella anymore. This was a declaration, a claim, an insult. He pulled out his phone and texted her to stay inside. Then he pulled out the gun and stepped deeper into the shadows. If death wanted a war, he'd get one. He saw the words scratched out. Mine. Sebastian had painted over it. Sloppy, rushed, red paint still dripping. And that made death smile. It meant he was getting under his skin, that Sebastian was cracking, that the protector was becoming unpredictable. Good. The more unstable Sebastian became, the more isolated Ella would feel, and when the world stopped believing her, when Sebastian fell apart, he would be the only one left standing, the only one who truly understood her. He left her a gift that night, a single sheet of paper under her pillow. It read, "He won't always be there, but I will." She didn't scream when she found the note. Not this time. She just sat on her bed, staring at it for nearly 20 minutes. Frozen. Hollow. Her fingers trembled, but her heart didn't race like it used to. She was numb. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. She clutched the sheet, tore it slowly in half, then in half again, and let the pieces scatter to the floor. But the words stayed in her head. He won't always be there. She looked toward the window, expecting to see movement. Nothing. Only night, only silence. Only him, somewhere out there, smiling in the dark. He watched her from the other side of the kitchen table. She was pale, quiet, withdrawn. She hadn't told him about the note. But he knew something had happened. He could see it in the way her hands shook as she held her mug, the way her eyes refused to meet his. He hated how helpless he felt. He had called in every favor, checked every lead, installed every alarm, but death kept slipping through the cracks, like smoke, like poison. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he wasn't just some bar owner with a savior complex, that he'd done things, bad things, things that might come back to haunt them both. But if she knew who he really was, would she still let him stay? Would she still believe he was the safer choice? He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. Even if it killed him. He watched the touch, the fingers, the softness. It made him sick. Ella's hands were meant for him, for trembling beneath his grip, for curling around his mask, for digging into his skin as she screamed his name. Not for holding someone like Sebastian. He sat on the rooftop above her apartment, legs swinging slowly, watching them through the skylight. They looked so normal. And that was the problem. She was pretending to be okay, pretending to be loved. But he knew the truth. He knew what she looked like when she cried, when she touched herself in the dark, when she whispered, "Why me?" He was the answer, and soon she'd stop asking. The nightmare was different this time. She wasn't being chased. She was standing still in her living room, wrapped in silence, while the masked man approached her slowly. No weapon, no rage, just a quiet presence that made her chest ache. He reached up and took off the mask, but she couldn't see his face. It was blurred, smudged out like a painting soaked in rain. She asked him, "Why are you doing this?" His voice echoed, low and familiar. "Because I see you." She woke up with tears on her cheeks, and for the first time, she didn't know if they were from fear or something far more dangerous. He wasn't sure when it shifted, when watching her wasn't enough anymore, when control gave way to craving, when obsession began to bleed into need. He had planned this all so perfectly: observe, isolate, own. But now, he wanted more. He wanted to feel her skin, hear her beg, taste her panic laced with trust. He wanted her to choose him, not because she loved him, but because she couldn't survive without him. She belonged to him in every way except one, her heart, and he'd take that too, soon. He stood beneath her window again, this time holding something behind his back. Not a gift, a reminder. He reached up and left it hanging on the fire escape. Ella's favorite locket, one she'd lost months ago and cried over for days. He'd taken it then. He was giving it back now, and she'd understand exactly what that meant. She found it at dawn. It dangled from the fire escape like a ghost. Her locket. She hadn't seen it since the day she dropped it outside her office, back before the stalking, before the cameras, before the shadows started breathing beside her. Her knees gave out beneath her as she reached for it. How long had he had it? How long had he known everything? She sat on the floor beneath the window, clutching it tight. It didn't make her scream. It made her ache. Because somewhere inside her, something whispered, "He sees me." And that voice, it didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like a secret, one she wasn't ready to admit, not even to herself. He watched her retreat inward. Every day she grew quieter, every night she flinched less. He should have been relieved, but he wasn't. She was adapting, and that terrified him. He saw the locket. He knew what it meant. The man wasn't just taunting them anymore. He was trying to connect with her, to make her feel seen, needed, protected in some twisted, manipulative way. It was working. He confronted her gently, asked if she wanted to move, to run, to disappear. She only looked at him and said, he'd still find me. And the worst part, she sounded okay with it. Sebastian stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him anymore. The darkness wasn't just haunting her, it was changing her.
She wore the locket. Not right away, but he saw it. She slipped it on beneath her shirt when Sebastian wasn't looking, a secret between them. His heart nearly stopped. He closed his eyes and imagined her fingers wrapping around it as she slept, her thumb brushing the cold metal, her lips mouthing his name in the dark. He had broken her, just enough, not shattered, bent. And in the bend, she was becoming his. He wouldn't wait much longer. He had one final gift, one final test. If she passed, he would reveal everything. And then, she would never leave him again. She dreamed of the locket, of fingers tracing her collarbone, voice whispering into her skin. She woke up panting, confused and furious with herself. What was happening to her? She'd hated him, feared him, screamed his name in terror, and now she wore his gifts like they meant something. Like he meant something. She told herself she was just playing along, that she was surviving. But in the quiet,
In the moments when Sebastian wasn't watching, she touched the locket and wondered, what would it feel like to finally see the face behind the mask? Would it ruin her, or would it finally set her free? He watched her drift. Not away from the man in the shadows, but away from him. She was still there physically, making coffee, sitting on the couch, flinching at loud sounds. But emotionally, spiritually, she was gone. He saw it in the way her eyes lingered on windows, in the way her fingers curled around the chain of that damned locket. And it destroyed him, because he had done everything right. Protected her, stayed up through the nights, risked everything, and still, she was slipping through his hands like water. He didn't blame her, he blamed him, the man behind the mask. The man who made her believe that obsession was love. Sebastian stood over the blueprint he'd drawn across the table. It was time to hunt him down. No more waiting, no more shadows, just fire. He saw Sebastian's war coming. The man was predictable, violent when cornered, noble to a fault. He would come soon, fists or bullets, thinking he could tear this apart, but he didn't understand. This wasn't just a game. This was fate. Ella had been his since the moment he saw her on that screen. Sleeping, vulnerable, whispering in her dreams. He had shaped her fear, taught her to feel again. He gave her purpose, presence, meaning, and soon, he would give her everything else. He stood inside her bedroom that night, silent, still. She didn't wake. He didn't touch her. He just listened to the way her breathing slowed when he was near. She knew, even in sleep. She knew who she belonged to. She woke up knowing something was wrong. Not a sound, not a movement, just presence. The weight of being watched. She sat up slowly, breath caught in her throat. Nothing in the room, but everything in her body screamed he was here. She didn't run, she didn't cry. She stood, walked to the window and whispered into the dark. Why are you doing this to me? No answer, just the wind. But something shifted. She wasn't terrified anymore. She was angry, confused, curious. What did he want? And God help her, why did she want to know? He tracked him to the storage facility on 9th and Grant, unregistered, closed for years. Sebastian entered alone, knife tucked in his belt, gun loaded, phone off. It was quiet, too quiet. He moved room to room, searching for signs, clues, maps, even the smell of her perfume. And then he found it. A room covered in photos of Ella, sleeping, laughing, crying, dancing alone in her apartment. Every wall was coded in her. He dropped the flashlight. This wasn't obsession, this was worship. He'd been too late. Death hadn't just been following Ella, he had built a shrine to her. He watched Sebastian leave, panicked, angry, desperate. Good. He wanted him rattled. He wanted the rival to know that he was everywhere, beneath Ella's bed, in the air she breathed, in the dreams she didn't dare speak aloud. She had begun to understand. That's why she didn't run. That's why she wore the locket. She was closer now, so close he could almost taste her surrender. But he needed to break one final wall. Sebastian had to fall. Only then would Ella be his in every way. No more hesitation, no more hiding. The mask would come off soon. And when it did, she would never look away again. She dreamed of hands again. Not gentle, not cruel, possessive. They touched her face in the dark, pressed against her throat, slid around her waist and pulled her back against something cold and still. She didn't fight. She melted. She woke with the locket tangled in her sheets and a single black rose lying on her pillow. No note, no sound. Just that, a symbol, a promise, a line that had already been crossed. Her heart thudded with something twisted, something she didn't recognize, not panic, longing. It terrified her, because the rose didn't scare her anymore. It made her feel seen. He hadn't gone back to Ella's yet. He needed time to breathe, to process, to pull himself out of the madness that shrine had carved into his skull. The pictures, the candles, the lock of her hair. Sebastian had seen death before, had caused it, but this was devotion carved out of insanity, and it was growing roots in her. He could see it, feel it, the way she hesitated when he called, the way her voice sounded distant, hollow. He was losing her to the very man he swore to protect her from, and if he didn't act soon, he might lose her completely. She hadn't screamed at the rose. She hadn't thrown it away. She'd held it, cradled it. That was all the proof he needed. She was his. She just didn't know it yet. But she would. Tonight, he would take the next step. He moved through her apartment like a shadow slipping through cracks. She wasn't home. She wouldn't be for another hour. He left her a letter on the bed, handwritten, ink-stained and raw. It said, "You're not broken. You're becoming, and I'm the one who sees it." He placed her old childhood stuffed animal beside it, one she thought she'd lost in college. He'd taken it years ago. He'd always been watching. She stood in the doorway, unable to move. The letter, the bear. She pressed a fist to her mouth, shaking, not from fear, from recognition. The handwriting, the phrasing, the way he knew her, really knew her when no one else ever had. She should have screamed, burned it, called Sebastian, but instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and reread the letter over and over. She didn't understand it, why it calmed her, why she felt more seen by the man in the mask than she ever had by her friends, her family, her father, why her body shivered in craving instead of terror. What the hell was wrong with her? He pulled up to her apartment, heart pounding. It had been 3 days since he'd seen her. She hadn't answered his last text, and every second he'd stayed away, he regretted. He knocked. She opened the door slowly, and he knew instantly something had changed. Her eyes were darker, her voice quieter. She held herself like a secret instead of a person. He stepped inside, scanning everything, the bed, the windows, the walls. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, lied. He didn't push. But as he left that night, he turned back one last time and saw the black rose in a glass of water on her nightstand. She'd kept the rose. He watched her rearrange it, shift it closer to the window where the sun could touch it, as if it were something precious, something alive. His Ella. She was evolving. No more fear, no more running, just fascination, curiosity, need. He had cultivated it slowly, like a gardener feeding darkness with petals and whispers. But it wasn't enough anymore. He needed her voice, her skin, her surrender. He slipped into the stairwell that night, just one floor below her, close enough to breathe her in, but still hidden, still patient. Because when the mask finally came off, he wanted her to choose him. She knew she was unraveling. The signs were everywhere. She'd stopped locking the window, left the rose untouched in its vase, kept the letter under her pillow. Every time Sebastian texted, she took longer to answer. Every time she thought about the man in the mask, her chest burned. But what terrified her most was how safe he made her feel. The way he knew her past, her scars. The things she whispered into darkness that even she didn't understand. Sebastian wanted to protect her, but death, he wanted to possess her. And deep down, some shattered part of her wanted that too.
He sat in his car outside her apartment, gripping the wheel hard enough to crack it. She was slipping from him, one black rose at a time. And he couldn't fight shadows, not like this. Not when she let them in. He had one option left. He'd traced the mask back to a man, a name buried deep in the foster system, erased from official records, a boy who vanished at 16, a phantom who reappeared only when someone went missing. He had photos, footage, proof, and if Ella wouldn't see it on her own, he'd show her everything. Even if it broke her, even if it meant losing her. He found the note Sebastian left her, folded, tucked beneath her door, inside a photo. Old, blurry, of him, unmasked, and for a second, something inside him snapped. This wasn't Sebastian protecting her, this was war. He took the photo, burned it, then slipped a new note into her mailbox. It read, "Would you still want me if you saw me?" No more games, no more patience. If she was truly his, she wouldn't care what he looked like. She'd love the monster, or she'd run, and he'd drag her back into the dark where she belonged. She read both notes, one from Sebastian, one from him. Two worlds, one trying to save her from the dark, the other whispering that she was the dark. And for the first time, she couldn't tell the difference. She stared at the photo Sebastian had tried to give her before he burned it, just a glimpse, just a face. But it didn't scare her, it made her ache. Because even if he wore a mask, even if he'd done terrible things, she understood him. His obsession, his silence, his loneliness. She saw him. And maybe that was the most dangerous part of all. He stood in front of her, broken photo in hand, voice shaking. "You need to see who he is." Ella said nothing, just stared at him with eyes that no longer looked like the girl he met months ago. The softness was gone, replaced by fire. Confusion. Something he couldn't reach anymore. "He's dangerous," Sebastian pleaded. "He's done this before." But she asked only one question. "Did you follow him? Did you go to his home?" He flinched. She nodded slowly, lips tight. "You did it, without telling me." And in that moment, he realized he'd already lost. Not because she didn't trust him, because she trusted someone else more. She hadn't rejected him, even after the photo, after the letter, after Sebastian's desperate attempt to tear them apart. She chose silence. That was all the permission he needed. He stood outside her door that night, not hiding, not waiting. He knocked once, twice, and the door opened. She stood there, barefoot, pale, trembling, not from fear, but from something heavier. He said nothing. She looked at him, breath caught, chest rising. "Is it really you?" He pulled off the mask, and for the first time, they stood in the same light. He was just a man, not a monster, not a demon, not the phantom she imagined in her nightmares. Just a man with haunted eyes and blood on his hands. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She stepped aside and let him in. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, like a shadow made real, waiting. She turned and asked the question she hadn't dared before. "Why me?" His voice cracked. "Because you were already drowning. And so was I." And in the silence that followed, she understood. This wasn't a love story. This was a surrender. He arrived too late. The door was unlocked, the apartment empty, but the scent lingered, his scent.
Sebastian's hand shook as he scanned the room. The glass with the black rose was shattered on the floor. Her bed, untouched. A note lay on the table. One line. "Don't follow." He screamed, not out of rage, out of grief, because the girl he'd loved had walked willingly into the arms of the man who broke her, and there was nothing left for him now but silence. She came with him, willingly, quietly. They didn't speak on the drive, just sat in the dark, breathing together. When they reached his cabin, deep in the woods, she stepped inside without question. She stood in the room filled with her photographs, her voice recordings, her entire life reflected back at her, and still, she didn't run. She simply asked, "Is this where you kept me? Before I knew?" He nodded. She touched the wall, then whispered, "Then this is where I want to stay." And something inside him broke, not with violence, but with relief. She slept in his bed that night. No chains, no locks, just skin against skin, breath against breath. She didn't know if she loved him, didn't know if this was madness or fate, but when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle, it was honest. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he asked for belonging, and she gave it. Because what do you do with a man who's broken you and still makes you feel whole? You don't run. You close your eyes and fall deeper. The papers called it a disappearance. No trace, no body, no signs of violence. Just a girl who vanished. Sebastian moved away, never recovered. Still walks with her name in his throat. But in the woods, far beyond the reach of rescue, there is a house, and in that house, a girl laughs in the arms of the man who stole her past and gave her a new name, a new beginning. Not a happy ending, a true one, because in the shadows, they finally found each other.
Thank you for listening to In the Shadows. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel haunted, breathless, or seen in the dark, then subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who craves stories like this. More is coming, and sometimes, the shadows never really let you go.